Hey music fans, Kathy Williams-DeVries here, bringing you a video that is applicable to all instruments, not just the clarinet, although it's most easily represented on a piano, and that is basic music theory. We're going to look at scales, modes, degrees of the scales, chord progressions, just a basic overall, just an introduction to music theory. So we know all the notes of the scale: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C. But also the notes can be known as C, C flat, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, F flat, E flat, D, D flat, and C. So every note has a couple of, well, the flats and the sharps have a couple of names, and we call them enharmonics. So a D flat is also a C sharp. An E flat is also a D sharp. E can be also F flat. F can be also E sharp, F sharp, G flat, G, A flat, G sharp, A sharp, B flat. A B is also a C flat, and a C can also be a B sharp. Okay, now we're going to have a look at some basic scales. So the first and easiest scale, especially on the piano and all C instruments, is a C major scale. And you may know the song from The Sound of Music. Oh dear, a female dear, pay a drop of golden sun, me and him, I call myself for a long way to run, so a needle pulling thread, la, I'm not to follow, so tea, I drink with jam and bread, that will bring us back to dough. All of the notes of the C major scale have a name. So you've got Do, Re, Mi, Fa, So, La, Ti, Do. And so that's C major. We have things called fixed do and movable do, but we won't go into that yet. A fixed do is where C is always do, because there are different degrees of the scale. So apart from the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, there's other names for the notes of the scale. So a C is the first degree of the scale. It's either called do, or you call it the tonic. And then the next note, D or re, it's the second note of the C major scale. It's called the supertonic. The third note, and while we're on supertonics, super meaning one up, you have subtonic, or leading note, which is one below C. So that's tonic, supertonic, subtonic, or leading note. Third note, Mi or E, is also known as the mediant. Now, that's going 1, 2, 3. We call that the interval of a third, whereas C to D is just a second. So C to E is a third. But if you go a third down, we call it the sub-mediant, or 3 below the tonic. Now, if we go up to F, we call it the subdominant, or a fourth. And what that means is that the subdominant, if you go from C and you go down 5, you get F. Whereas if you go from C to G, we call that the dominant. And we've covered the other two, that A is the submediant or the interval of a sixth, and then C to B is the subtonic or leading note, leading back to C. Now, you may have noticed that all scales sound the same but starting on different notes. So any major scale and that's because they all follow a pattern. So, now, as well as different names for the notes and the submediants and tonics and dos and res and stuff, the basic building block of the scale is what we call the semitone. And you'll know what a semitone is because it's jaws. And that's what we call a semitone. And a tone is simply two semitones, because in music, if you sort of stick a semi in front of it, it halves the value, whether it be note length or interval length. So if you go two semitones, so that's one semitone, if you go another semitone, and that's what we call a tone. So that the basic major scale is made up of C to D tone, D to E tone, E to F semitone, F to G tone, G to A tone, A to B tone, B to C semitone. So we get tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And that's what every single major scale is made up of. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So that a C major scale has exactly the same pattern as, say, E flat major. Sorry, I don't really play piano all that often. And then once you've got, you know, your semitones and your notes and your subdominants and whatever organised, you can start to make a little bit of music. What happens is we have what are called chords. And they're not as apparent if you're on like a single line instrument. But if you go degree 1 of the scale, degree 3 and 5, sounds nice, doesn't it? We call that a triad because there's 3 notes. The entire chord, you just stick the octave back on again like that. And also, we name our chords after the degree of the scale they fall on. So, in C major, if you play C, E and G, it's called the tonic triad because it starts on the tonic. Now, the 3 most popular chords of music is this one, which is your tonic. Then if you start on the subdominant, there's another chord there, and if you start on the dominant, so you've got 3 major chords. And we call that, it's a common progression, 1, 4, 5, 1. Tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic. And leading up to that, we have a very, very popular chord progression, which is called the 12 bar blues. It has a few different examples, but basically, and you'll see this in all of your pop music and a lot of rock music and blues, is they have exactly this same chord progression. So you got tonic, 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 subdominant, subdominant, tonic, tonic, dominant, dominant. So and you can put all sorts of stuff over that. Another chord is if you add the 7th note, the flat 7th note, the scale, you get a pretty cool bluesy chord, and we call that the 7th or the dominant 7th. So if you're in C, your dominant 7th will be G, B, D, F, and then it very much wants to go back to. So what is that? That's the dominant leading to the tonic, and that's sounds nice, doesn't it? And you can so as another example of the 12-bar blues. And that's a very common chord progression. And what you do is, and you then say put notes over the. And you can make almost any sort of tune out of that if you have that as your basic chord progression. I'm not going into the minors yet, but basically a minor is built on the sub-midget, so that and we call it a relative minor. So from C you go down to A, and then you just play the notes. Doesn't sound quite right yet, because what that's called is the natural minor. We have a couple of different minor scales. There is the harmonic, where you play it exactly the same as the natural minor, but you put a sharp 7. And then you've got a melodic minor, which is easy for the singers, where you raise the 6th and the 7th and then flatten them on the way down. And so your chord's different. So this would be a tonic chord. So the tonic chord is minor, but if you go into the dominant and the subdominant, so it's a little bit different, because in a minor chord progression, the dominant is the only one that is in a major key, because you've got that G sharp, remember. So from A, and then you've got it turns out to be an E major triad, and that's your basic chords. And there's also something called modes. These were sort of in ancient Greek and Roman times, and basically they were different scales that used only the white keys, but started on different notes so that the scale sounds different. So your basic C major scale is what we call the Ionian scale, and that's the one we use today for the major. So it starts on a C, ends on a C, that's your major scale. But as you go up the piano, you've got the Dorian. So it kind of sounds like D minor, doesn't it? But you've got a B natural and a C. Then you've got one that starts on an E. Different because you start with a semitone. And I'll just check the name of that. I'm pretty sure it's Mixolydian, but let me just check. A while since I did the mode. No, it's Phrygian. So if it starts on E or Mi, and then the one that starts on, so this is a different one because it starts with a semitone. The next one is Lydian. So that's very close to an F major scale, but you've got that B natural in there. And also it's got a pretty funky little thing there. That's actually what we call diminished fifth or augmented fourth. Probably, no, it'll be augmented fourth because there's your major fourth. Then you've got Mixolydian. And so that's a very major sounding scale, but you've got an F natural instead of an F sharp. Now, the one starting on A sounds very much like A minor. Except it's got a G natural, so that's the, we call that the Aeolian. And the one that starts on a B is actually called Locrian. And that's because you've got that really sort of that interesting, it's a diminished fifth. So whereas in the Phrygian we had an augmented fourth, in the Locrian we have an diminished fifth, and that's a pretty funky sound. And Locrian sort of coming from the devil. So I think that's probably enough sort of basic theory. I've probably completely bamboozled you. But I just wanted to help out with just sort of basic music theory so that when you decide to write your own music, because lots of music so you get your boogie woogie, I mean there's a heap of stuff, and I mean you can even sort of add basic chord progression. You can actually write so much stuff, and it gives the piece a lot of direction when you know what notes you can use. So I'll leave it there. I think it's a good place to leave it. I do encourage you to use Google and Wikipedia, really good stuff. Any questions that you want clarified, please do contact me via email, Skype, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. So, thanks for listening and bye for now.